Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
After my husband's mistress got pregnant, his family offered me $8 million to sign the divorce. They humiliated me. "You're just a mistake we're willing to pay to erase." I didn't cry, didn't beg. I left without looking back. But when I discovered the truth 3 months later, everything changed. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Charlotte's story begins with an impossible choice and a family secret that changes everything. Before we continue, I'd love to know, have you ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters here. Please note, while some details in this narrative are fictionalized for storytelling and educational value, the core message about resilience and boundaries reflects real-life wisdom that could be meaningful for many. There are moments that divide your life into before and after, moments so sharp, so definitive, that everything you thought you knew splits clean down the middle. For me, that moment came on a rain-soaked Friday evening in late March 2024, when I came home early and heard my husband call another woman sweetheart. My name is Charlotte. I'm 30 years old, and I've been married to Stanley for 7 years that were supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. Instead, they became a slow erosion of everything I believed love could be. That Friday started like any other. I'd spent the afternoon with Rebecca, my best friend, who owns a contemporary art gallery downtown. We'd met for coffee that stretched into an early dinner. Rebecca had noticed something was off, she always did, but I'd brushed it away with practiced ease. I was good at pretending everything was fine, even when the foundation beneath my feet had been crumbling for months. I should have noticed the signs earlier. The late night Stanley explained away as client emergencies. The way his smile had grown distant, like he was looking past me instead of at me. The way he angled his phone away whenever I walked into a room, but I'd been too focused on other failures, the monthly disappointment of negative pregnancy tests, the 3 rounds of IVF that had drained our savings, and my hope in equal measure. The way Stanley's parents looked at me with thinly veiled disappointment. 7 years of trying, 7 years of doctor's appointments and hormone injections, and holding my breath every month only to watch it all come to nothing. 7 years of Dorothy, my mother-in-law, asking in that particular tone, "Any news yet, Charlotte?" As if children were something you could order on demand. As if my body's refusal to cooperate was a personal slight against the Ashford family legacy. But that Friday evening, none of that mattered. When I pulled into our driveway 20 minutes earlier than expected, Rebecca had been called away by a gallery emergency. I walked into a house that felt different. The lights were dim. The rain hammered against the windows with a rhythm that should have felt cozy, but instead sounded ominous. I kicked off my shoes in the foyer, calling out Stanley's name. No answer. His car was in the driveway, his briefcase on the hall table. He was home, just not answering. Then I heard voices from his study at the end of the hallway. The door was cracked open, a sliver of warm light spilling onto the hardwood floor. I moved toward it without thinking, my footsteps silent in stockinged feet. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Strained with emotion, I recognized too well the kind of desperation that comes from needing something you're not sure you'll get. I stopped just outside the door. Maybe some part of me already knew. "Stanley, we need to tell her." The woman's voice cracked. "I'm 3 months along. I can't keep hiding this." 3 months. The words hit me like ice water. I felt my knees lock my hand, gripping the doorframe for support. Stanley's response came low, careful. "Not yet, Brittany. Give me time. I need to handle this the right way." Brittany. Something tugged at my memory, Stanley mentioning a new assistant at the firm. Someone efficient, he'd said. Someone who really understood the demands of his work. Time. Brittany's voice rose. "How much more time do you need?" I'm showing Stanley. "People are starting to notice." "I know." His voice softened in a way I recognized the tone he used when he wanted to soothe, to placate. The tone he'd once used with me. "I know, sweetheart. I'll take care of it. I promise." Sweetheart. That word, such a small, ordinary word, carved something out of me. He used to call me that. Years ago, before the fertility treatments, before the monthly disappointments, before I became just another item on his to-do list. I stood in that hallway, rain drumming against the windows, and felt my entire world tilt sideways. 3 months. While I'd been scheduling another consultation with yet another specialist, measuring my temperature every morning, crying in bathroom stalls at negative test results, he'd been building a family with someone else. The rational part of my brain said I should burst through that door, confront them both, demand answers, explanations, apologies. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away slowly, carefully, like I was retreating from a wild animal. My hands were shaking. My heart hammered so hard I thought they'd hear it through the door. But I didn't make a sound. I walked back down that hallway, our hallway, the one we'd painted together 3 years ago, and out the front door. I got in my car, started the engine. The windshield wipers fought against the rain as I pulled out of the driveway. I drove for 2 hours. No destination, no plan. Just driving through streets that blurred with rain and tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. I passed the hospital where we'd done our IVF treatments, the park where Stanley had proposed on one knee, the coffee shop where we'd spent lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper in comfortable silence. All of it felt like someone else's life now. Somewhere around mile 30, the tears stopped. The shock began to crystallize into something else, something harder, sharper, not quite anger yet. More like a cold, clear understanding that nothing would ever be the same. I thought about the last 7 years, the way I'd molded myself into what his family wanted, the way I'd given up my interior design work to be a proper Ashford wife, the way I'd smiled through Dorothy's passive-aggressive comments about my inability to provide an heir, the way I'd blamed myself for our empty house, our unused nursery, our childless Christmas cards. And while I'd been breaking myself apart trying to fix something I couldn't control, Stanley had been creating the family I thought we both wanted, just not with me. The rain finally began to ease as I found myself on a quiet road I didn't recognize. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat in the sudden silence. My phone had been buzzing, Stanley no doubt realizing I was gone. I didn't look at it. Instead, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My mascara had run. My eyes were red and swollen. I looked destroyed. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman whose entire life had just shattered. But as I sat there watching rain droplets race down the windshield, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him tonight. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg for explanations, because I already knew the truth. And more importantly, I knew what I needed to do. For 7 years, I'd been Charlotte Ashford, the dutiful wife, the disappointing daughter-in-law, the woman who couldn't have children. But that woman, the one who would have gone back into that house and tried to fix things, tried to understand, tried to compete, she was done. I started the engine again and drove home through streets that no longer felt familiar. When I pulled back into our driveway at nearly midnight, every light in the house was on. Stanley's silhouette passed by the living room window. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and opened the car door. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the life I'd been living was over. And whatever came next, divorce, confrontation, starting over, I would face it as myself. Not as the woman Stanley wanted me to be, not as the daughter-in-law Dorothy expected. Just Charlotte, the woman I'd almost forgotten existed. 3 weeks passed before I said anything. 3 weeks of sleeping in the same bed, eating breakfast across from each other, pretending everything was normal. 3 weeks of silence, watching, waiting, planning. I kept hearing that word on repeat, sweetheart. He used to call me that back when he'd bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, when he'd pull me close and kiss my temple for no reason. I couldn't remember when he'd stopped. The affection had faded so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was completely gone. But I wasn't gathering evidence for revenge. I was gathering it for survival. Because somewhere in those 3 weeks while I watched my husband become a stranger, I understood something crucial: this wasn't going to be a fair fight. If I was going to walk away from 7 years of my life, I was going to do it smart. Stanley's patterns became easier to read once I started paying attention. The late-night phone calls he took in the garage claiming it was just work. The overnight business trips that used to happen quarterly but now occurred weekly. The way he'd shower the moment he got home, even on days when he claimed to have been in meetings all afternoon. I started documenting everything. Not obsessively, not dramatically, just methodically. Dates, times, inconsistencies in his stories. I took photos of his phone screen when he left it unattended, just glimpses. A contact saved as B, with strings of texts that were deleted almost immediately. Receipts for restaurants we'd never been to together. Hotel charges he'd explained away as client dinners that ran late. The paper trail was building piece by careful piece. On a Tuesday afternoon, I drafted an email from a new account. I need a divorce attorney, discreetly. No connections to Ashford Legal Group. Can you help? I'd found Andrea Stone through a college friend who'd gone through her own messy divorce. She's fierce, my friend had told me, and she doesn't back down from powerful families. Now, that was exactly what I needed. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the Ashford name or their fleet of attorneys. Andrea's response came within an hour. Available for consultation Thursday, 2 p.m. Come alone, park 2 blocks away. She understood the stakes before I'd even explained them. The Ashford family dinner happened every third Saturday. It was tradition Dorothy had informed me during our engagement, with the kind of weight that made it clear this wasn't optional. For 7 years, I'd shown up to that massive dining room playing the role of dutiful daughter-in-law, while Dorothy made increasingly pointed comments about my failure to produce grandchildren. This particular Saturday in mid-April, I almost didn't go. Stanley had been distant all week, barely looking at me, but showing up was part of the plan, acting normal, giving them no reason to suspect I knew anything. The Ashford estate sat on 15 acres in the Connecticut countryside, the kind of property that spoke of old money and older expectations. Walter, the estate manager, opened the massive front door as I approached. He was a kind man, always had been. Tonight his eyes held something I'd never seen before: pity. He knew. Somehow he knew. Inside, Dorothy and Charles were already in the drawing room, cocktails in hand. Dorothy looked immaculate, as always, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon pearls at her throat. They both turned when I entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dorothy's greeting was measured precise cutting. "Charlotte, you look tired. Not 'how are you' or 'good to see you.' Just an observation delivered like a diagnosis." Stanley appeared from the hallway, and I watched something flicker between him and his mother, a look I couldn't quite read but understood in my bones. They'd been talking about me, about what to do with the wife who couldn't fulfill her primary function. Dinner was served, all 6 courses of it, with conversation that felt more like a chess match than family bonding. Charles talked about the firm's latest cases. Dorothy asked about Stanley's workload with leading questions. Then she pivoted smooth as glass. "Stanley tells us his new assistant has been invaluable. Brittany, I believe quite capable apparently, really understands the demands of the work." I kept my face neutral, took a sip of wine. Brittany. The name hung in the air between us like smoke. Dorothy watched me over the rim of her glass, waiting for a reaction. I gave her nothing. Stanley shifted uncomfortably. "She's very organized, helps keep the case files straight." Dorothy smiled, thin and cold. "How fortunate you found someone so compatible." The word hung there, loaded with meaning. Compatible. Not just professionally. Dorothy knew. Of course she knew. She'd probably known before I did. The family, always closed ranks, protected their own. I'd never been one of their own, not really. The conversation drifted to estate management, to Dorothy's charity board, to summer plans. I participated when required, stayed quiet when I could. But I felt Dorothy's eyes returning to me again and again, assessing, calculating. Then, as dessert was being cleared, she delivered her verdict. The whole table went quiet. Dorothy leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on me with surgical precision. "Some women are meant to be mothers, Charlotte." Her voice was conversational, almost kind. That made it worse. "And some aren't. Perhaps it's time you accepted which category you fall into." The words landed like a slap. Around the table, everyone froze. Stanley's fork clattered against his plate. Charles cleared his throat uncomfortably, but nobody contradicted her. Nobody came to my defense. I felt heat rising in my chest, anger so hot and sharp it made my hands shake. I wanted to throw my wine in her face. I wanted to tell her exactly what I knew about her precious son and his pregnant assistant. I wanted to watch her perfect composure crack. Instead, I smiled. I met her eyes and smiled with every ounce of grace I'd learned in 7 years of being an Ashford wife. "Perhaps you're right, Dorothy." My voice came out steady, almost pleasant. Perhaps it's time I accepted a lot of things. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe? Or the first hint of uncertainty. She'd expected tears, defensiveness, anything but agreement. The rest of dinner passed in careful, polite conversation. When it ended, I thanked Dorothy and Charles with the same formal courtesy I always had. Stanley walked me to my car and tried to say something. "Charlotte, what my mother said." I held up a hand. "It's fine." "It's not fine. She shouldn't have—" "Stanley." I looked at him directly for the first time in weeks. "It's fine." That night, sitting at my desk while Stanley showered upstairs, I started a document. Dates, times, behaviors, everything I'd observed over the past 3 weeks. I backed it up to a cloud account he didn't know existed, then cleared the browser history. I made my first real decision that night. If they were going to erase me and Dorothy's comment had made it clear that's exactly what they were planning, I was going to make sure I left with evidence, with dignity, and with enough leverage that they'd never see me as weak again. Because I wasn't weak. I'd just been fighting the wrong battle. But that fight was over. The new one was just beginning. The email arrived on a Monday morning in early May, 2 months after I'd heard the word that changed everything. Subject line, "Meeting required, urgent." Sender, Charles Ashford. No pleasantries. No pretense. Just a date, a time, and an address I knew too well. Ashford Legal Group, 15th floor, conference room B. Tuesday, 10 a.m. sharp. I read it twice over my coffee, the words, not surprising me in the slightest. If anything, I'd been waiting for this. The only question had been, when, not if. Stanley came downstairs as I was rereading the email, looking like he hadn't slept. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms for 2 weeks now. He'd moved to the guest room to avoid disturbing me with his late nights. We both knew that wasn't the real reason. I set my phone down on the counter with enough force that he looked up. His eyes went to the screen still displaying the email. I watched his face cycle through recognition, guilt, resignation. Stanley opened his mouth, closed it. Tried again. I held up one hand, stopping him. "Don't. Whatever you're about to say, just don't." He stood there, coffee mug halfway to his lips, looking like a stranger. How had I spent 7 years sleeping beside him without seeing what was right in front of me? Charlotte the 1st. I got an email from your father. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. I assume you know what it's about. He gripped the edge of the counter. I tried to stop this. I told them, "You told them what, that you wanted more time, that you weren't ready, Stanley. When were you going to be ready? When she's due? When the baby's born? Or were you just going to keep living both lives until someone forced you to choose?" He flinched. Good. I wanted him to understand that I wasn't the same woman who'd driven around crying 3 weeks ago. That woman had cried herself out. This woman had work to do. I left him standing in the kitchen and went upstairs to get dressed. I had calls to make. Rebecca picked up on the first ring. "Tell me." "They're making their move. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. "Do you want me there?" I paused, considered it. Rebecca would come in. A heartbeat would sit beside me through whatever was coming, but this was something I needed to do without backup. "No, but I need you on standby. If I don't call you by noon, something's gone wrong." "Charlie, you know this is going to be brutal, right? They're not going to play fair." "I know, that's why I have Andrea." My next call was to Andrea Stone. We'd met in person once since that first consultation, a careful meeting at a coffee shop 3 towns over. She'd reviewed my evidence, asked pointed questions about our finances, our prenuptial agreement, which didn't exist, and the power dynamics in the Ashford family. Then she'd looked at me with sharp eyes and said, "They're going to try to bury you. Are you prepared to fight?" "The meeting's tomorrow," I said when she answered. 10 a.m. at their office. "I'll be there by 9:30. Charlotte, remember what we discussed. Don't engage with anything they say. Don't react. Let me handle the legal parts." "What if they ask me questions directly?" "Defer to me, or simply say you'll need time to consider. This is their game, their territory. Don't let them rush you into anything." The rest of that day passed in a strange haze. Stanley disappeared to his office downtown, or that's what he said. I didn't ask for details. Didn't care to know. In the evening, I drove to our bank and accessed our safe deposit box. Inside, I placed copies of everything I'd gathered, the documentation of Stanley's irregular hours, the photos of his phone, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements. Andrea already had copies, but I wanted another backup, somewhere they couldn't touch. That evening, I laid out my clothes for the next day with military precision. The black suit sharply tailored, a white blouse conservative, low heels professional, not provocative, pearl earrings simple. No wedding ring. I'd stopped wearing it 2 weeks ago and Stanley hadn't commented. I reviewed my documents one last time, making notes in the margins, highlighting key dates. Andrea would have her own copies, but I needed to know this information cold. Around midnight, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at our manicured lawn, the flower beds I'd planted 3 springs ago. This house had been my home for 7 years. When had it stopped feeling like home? When had it become just a house? I thought about the speech I'd prepared, the calm, rational words I'd practiced. But standing there in the dark, I realized I didn't need a speech. I just needed to be clear about one thing: I wasn't leaving as the woman they thought I was. I wasn't leaving broken, desperate, apologetic. I was leaving on my terms. Tomorrow I would walk into that building knowing I might walk out with nothing. But at least I'd walk out with my dignity intact. With proof that I hadn't been blind or stupid, just married to a man who'd chosen the easy lie over the hard truth. I finally went to bed around 1 a.m., but sleep didn't come. Somewhere down the hall, Stanley was probably awake too. We were both in this house, both awake, both preparing for tomorrow. But we might as well have been on different continents. I wondered when exactly we'd become strangers. And more importantly, when had I stopped caring? Because that was the strangest part. Lying there in the dark, thinking about my husband of 7 years, I felt nothing. No love, but no hate either. Just a vast, empty neutrality. Maybe that was the real end of a marriage. Not the dramatic confrontations or the tears. Just the quiet moment when you realize the person you married has become someone you wouldn't choose to know. Tomorrow would formalize what had already happened. Tomorrow would put legal words to an emotional truth I'd been living with for weeks. I was ready. The conference room at Ashford Legal Group was colder than I expected. Or maybe that was just me. Andrea Stone sat to my right, her briefcase open, pen ready. Across from us, Dorothy and Charles Ashford looked like they were presiding over a board meeting, which I suppose they were. A business meeting to erase me. The table between us was polished mahogany, so reflective I could see my own face staring back at me. I looked calm, composed. That was good. That was what I needed them to see. Dorothy wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car. Charles sat beside her in charcoal gray, his hands folded on the table, like a judge about to deliver a verdict. To his left sat Nathan Pierce, their attorney, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a wedding ring so polished it caught the light every time he moved his hand. Andrea leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Remember, don't say anything unless I clear it first." I nodded once. Nathan Pierce opened a leather folder and slid a document across the table toward us. It was thick, maybe 30 pages. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ashford," he began, and I almost laughed at the formality. "We've prepared a comprehensive settlement agreement that we believe is both fair and generous given the circumstances." Fair, generous, I kept my face neutral. Andrea picked up the document and began flipping through it. I watched her eyes move across the pages, her expression unreadable. Nathan continued, "The terms are as follows. A lump sum payment of $8 million to be transferred within 10 business days of the signed agreement. In exchange, you will relinquish all present and future claims to the Ashford estate assets and any financial interest in Ashford Holdings or its subsidiaries. $8 million. I felt the number land in my chest like a stone. Andrea's pen scratched across her notepad. She didn't look up. Additionally, Nathan said, "We're prepared to offer $500,000 in relocation assistance should you choose to leave Connecticut. This includes moving expenses, temporary housing, and legal fees associated with establishing residency elsewhere." Choose, as if it were a choice. Dorothy hadn't said a word yet. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the table, her gaze fixed somewhere just past my left shoulder. She looked like a woman who had already won and was simply waiting for me to accept it. Charles spoke next. His voice was low measured. We believe this offer reflects the years you've spent as part of this family, Charlotte. It's more than fair. And it allows everyone to move forward with dignity. Dignity. I almost said it out loud, almost asked him if he knew what that word meant. Andrea set the document down. This agreement is heavily skewed, she said, her tone sharp. My client is being asked to relinquish rights without any provisions for spousal support property division or consideration of marital contribution. Nathan smiled thinly. Mrs. Ashford signed a prenuptial agreement 7 years ago. The terms of that agreement are enforceable. Enforceable doesn't mean equitable, Andrea shot back. I looked at Nathan, then at Charles, then at Dorothy. What happens if I refuse? I asked. The room went quiet. Nathan folded his hands. Then we proceed to litigation. And I assure you, Mrs. Ashford, that process will be lengthy, expensive, and far less pleasant. Dorothy finally looked at me. Her eyes were ice. There are incidents on record, Charlotte, she said softly. Behavioral concerns, emotional instability, documented interactions that could be troubling in a courtroom setting. My stomach turned. Andrea's voice cut through the air like a blade. Are you suggesting you fabricated a narrative to discredit my client? Dorothy didn't blink. I'm suggesting that perception matters, and in a courtroom, perception becomes reality. I felt my hands tighten in my lap. I forced them to relax. This was it. The moment they'd been building toward. The moment they would try to break me. Dorothy leaned forward. Her voice was calm, clinical, like she was discussing a quarterly earnings report. Here's $8 million. Take the money and get the hell out of our lives. You're not family, you never were. You're just a mistake we're willing to pay to erase. The words hung in the air. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't let them see the way those words sliced through me. Andrea's hand touched my arm, a silent warning. Don't react. I took a breath, let it out slowly. Then I smiled. Not a big smile. Not a fake one. Just the kind of smile you give someone when you finally truly understood them. Thank you for the offer, I said quietly. But I'm not signing anything today. Nathan frowned. Mrs. Ashford, this offer expires in 72 hours. If you don't, then my attorney will review it within 72 hours, I said, cutting him off, and will respond accordingly. I stood. Andrea stood with me. Dorothy's expression didn't change, but I saw it just for a second, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Charles started to say something, but Dorothy raised a hand. He stopped. There's one thing in that contract you need to understand first. Charlotte, Dorothy said, her voice soft, almost kind. I paused. She didn't explain. She just looked at me, her smile thin and dangerous. We'll discuss it later, she said, when you're ready to be reasonable. Andrea placed a hand on my shoulder. We're done here. We walked out. Nathan Pierce followed us to the elevator. He didn't say anything, just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching us like we were suspects leaving an interrogation room. The elevator doors opened. Andrea and I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Nathan's face. He looked almost sorry. The elevator descended in silence. Andrea finally spoke. You did well in there. I didn't answer. I was still hearing Dorothy's voice in my head. You're not family. You never were. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. We stepped out into the marble lobby. Andrea stopped and turned to me. Charlotte, whatever's in that contract, whatever Dorothy was hinting at, we'll figure it out. But you can't let them intimidate you into signing before we know what we're dealing with. I nodded. I know. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of Dorothy's words pressing down on me. There's one thing you need to understand first. What did they know? What had they found? I walked out of that building into the cool May air, and for the first time since that rainy Friday night in March, I felt something close to fear, not because of what they'd said, but because of what they hadn't. 24 hours after Dorothy called me a mistake, I sat in Andrea Stone's office with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and a decision I couldn't avoid. Andrea spread the contract across the desk like evidence at a crime scene. In a way it was. Her office was smaller than I expected. Not cramped, just efficient. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall stuffed with legal volumes that looked like they'd actually been read. A window behind her desk overlooked downtown Portland, the afternoon light cutting sharp angles across the room. Andrea had reading glasses perched on her nose. She was marking up the contract with a red pen, making notes in the margins like a professor grading a failing paper. I watched her work, waiting. Finally, she looked up. "This is a trap, Charlotte." I'd expected that, but hearing it out loud still made my stomach turn. "Which part?" I asked. "All of it." She flipped to page 12 and tapped a section with her pen. "This relocation incentive clause. If you don't leave Connecticut within 90 days, they can claim you've breached the agreement and demand the $8 million back, plus interest." I stared at the paragraph, the words blurred together. "So they're exiling me," I said. "Essentially, yes." Andrea flipped to another page. "And this non-disparagement clause. It's one-sided. They can say whatever they want about you. You can't defend yourself. If you do, they can sue you for breach and take the money back." I felt a cold creeping anger settle into my chest. "So I take the money and disappear," I said slowly. "And if anyone asks why I left, I can't tell the truth." "Correct." I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked under me. "What are my options?" Andrea set the pen down. "Fight it in court. Discovery depositions trial. It'll be expensive, public, and brutal. Or take the money, but rewrite the terms." I looked at her. "Can we do that?" "We can try." She leaned forward, her hands folded on the desk. "What do you want, Charlotte?" I thought about Dorothy's face across that boardroom table, the way she'd looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "You're just a mistake we're willing to pay to erase." I took a breath. "I want the relocation clause removed," I said, "or at least changed. I'll move if I want to, but I'm not being forced out like a criminal." Andrea made a note. "Okay, what else?" "The non-disparagement clause needs to go both ways. If I can't talk, neither can they." "Agreed." Another note. "Anything else?" I hesitated. "Then, if they violate the agreement, if they come after me, if they try to manipulate the terms, I want a penalty clause. $2 million. Payable immediately." Andrea's eyebrows lifted. "That's bold." "They want to treat this like a business deal," I said. "Fine. But business deals have consequences when people don't hold up their end." Andrea smiled. Not a big smile. Just the faint curve of someone who respected what they were hearing. "What about the $8 million?" she asked. "Do you want to negotiate for more?" I thought about it. I could ask for 10, 12, more. But that wasn't what this was about. "No," I said. "I don't want their money. I want my freedom, and I want to walk away knowing I didn't sell my self-respect to get it." Andrea nodded slowly. "All right, let me draft a counterproposal." She turned to her computer and started typing. The sound of the keys filled the room. I watched the buildings outside the window, the way the light shifted as clouds moved across the sky. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "How's it going?" I typed back, "I'm not backing down." 3 dots appeared. Then good. "Let me know if you need anything." I set the phone down. Andrea kept typing. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, she turned the screen toward me. "Read this," she said. "Tell me if I missed anything." I leaned forward and scanned the document. It was concise, professional. Every clause I'd asked for was there, written in clean, unambiguous language. "It's perfect," I said. Andrea hit print. The machine hummed to life. She pulled the pages out, clipped them together, and slid them into an envelope. "I'll send this to Nathan Pierce tonight," she said. "He'll forward it to Dorothy and Charles. Then we wait." "How long?" "Could be hours. Could be days. Depends on how much they want this to go away quietly." I nodded. Andrea leaned back in her chair and took off her glasses. "Charlotte, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why aren't you asking for more money?" I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't judging, just curious. "Because I'm not signing away my self-respect, Andrea," I said quietly. "I'm buying my freedom, but I'm buying it on my terms." She studied me for a moment, then she nodded. "That's the smartest thing I've heard all week," she said. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 48 hours in my head. The boardroom, Dorothy's voice, the contract, Andrea's red pen. I thought about what came next. If they accepted, I'd have to leave. Pack up everything. Say goodbye to the house I'd spent 7 years turning into a home. If they didn't accept, I'd have to fight. And fighting meant courtrooms and depositions and dragging everything into the light. I didn't know which outcome I wanted more. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because when my phone rang the next morning, the sunlight was already streaming through the window. I grabbed the phone. Andrea's name was on the screen. "Hello." "They accepted," she said. I sat up. "What?" "Everything. Nathan called me 20 minutes ago. They're agreeing to all your terms. Relocation is optional. Non-disparagement is mutual. Penalty clause is in. We sign on Friday." I couldn't speak. "Charlotte." Andrea's voice was careful. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded far away. "Yeah, I'm okay." Nathan's tone was different, Andrea said. "Almost respectful. I think you surprised them." I almost laughed. "Good. We'll finalize everything on Friday, 10 a.m. at my office. Bring ID and anything you want to keep from the house, sentimental items, documents, whatever. Once you sign, you won't want to go back there." "Okay," I said. "Charlotte." "Yeah, you did the right thing." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Thanks, Andrea." I hung up. 4 days. I had 4 days to pack 7 years of my life into boxes. 4 days to say goodbye to the person I'd been when I walked into that house as Stanley Ashford's wife. 4 days before I became someone else, someone free. I looked around the bedroom, the bed we'd shared, the dresser with his cologne still sitting on top, the closet where my wedding dress hung in its plastic garment bag. I stood up. It was time to start packing. Packing 7 years into boxes should have taken longer than 3 days, but it didn't. Turns out, when you strip away everything that belonged to someone else, his furniture, his art, his version of who you were supposed to be, there isn't much left. Just me. And that was enough. Rebecca showed up Wednesday morning with a stack of cardboard boxes and 2 cups of coffee. "Where do we start?" she asked, setting the cups down on the kitchen counter. I looked around the house. The leather couch Stanley had picked out. The abstract painting his mother had given us as a wedding gift. The dining table where we'd hosted dinners for people I didn't actually like. "With everything that's actually mine," I said. "It won't take long." She gave me a look, not pity, just understanding. "All right," she said, "let's do this." We started in the bedroom. I pulled my clothes out of the closet, dresses, jeans, sweaters, and folded them into boxes. Rebecca worked on the books, wrapping each one in newspaper before stacking them carefully. "You want these photo albums?" she asked, holding up a leather-bound album from our honeymoon. I glanced at it. The cover was embossed with our initials, C and S. "Leave it," I said. "You sure? I don't need pictures to remember who I used to be." She set it aside and kept packing. I found a shoebox in the back of the closet. Inside were small things I'd saved over the years. Movie ticket stubs, a napkin from the restaurant where Stanley proposed, a note he'd written me during our first year of marriage thinking of you. "Can't wait to come home." I held the note for a moment, reading the words in his familiar handwriting. I used to save these. Proof that we were real. Now they're just relics from someone else's life. I dropped the box into the trash. Rebecca didn't say anything, just kept wrapping books. By evening, the bedroom was mostly empty. My side of the closet was bare. The dresser drawers were open and cleared out. The room looked bigger without my things in it, like I'd never been there at all. I was taping up a box in the living room when I heard the front door open. Stanley. He stopped in the doorway staring at the stacks of boxes lining the hallway. His tie was loosened, his jacket slung over one arm. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "please, can we talk?" I set the tape gun down. "There's nothing left to say, Stanley." "There's a lot to say." He stepped closer. "I know Stop." I stood up facing him. "I don't want an apology. I don't want an explanation. I just want to leave." He ran a hand through his hair. "The baby, Brittany. She's due in July. I thought you should know." I felt nothing. "Congratulations," I said. His face crumpled. "Charlotte?" "I mean it," I said. "I hope it all works out for you." He stared at me like I was a stranger. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. "I did," I said finally, past tense. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and walked down the hallway to the guest room. I heard the door close. Rebecca appeared in the doorway carrying 2 empty boxes. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." Thursday passed in a blur. More boxes, more tape, more things I didn't realize I'd accumulated over 7 years. By Friday morning, the house was almost empty. Just furniture and a few boxes left for the movers to handle. I did one final walkthrough. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. I stopped at the nightstand on my side of the bed, opened the drawer. There were a few things left, old jewelry I never wore, letters from my mother, a pair of reading glasses I'd forgotten about. I scooped them into a small bag, moving quickly. I had to be at Andrea's office by 10 to sign the papers. No time to linger. As I pulled the drawer all the way out to make sure I hadn't missed anything, something slipped and fell. An envelope, my new health insurance card from Portland, the paperwork I'd filed for Oregon residency, my new address. It slid down the back of the nightstand, wedging itself in the narrow gap between the drawer and the frame. I didn't see it. I was already moving toward the closet, checking the top shelf one last time. Satisfied, I grabbed the bag, closed the bedroom door, and walked back to the kitchen. I set my house keys on the counter, right next to the coffee maker Stanley used every morning. I stood at the threshold one last time. 7 years. This house had been my cage. Beautiful, expensive, and suffocating. I didn't look back when I closed the door. If I had, maybe I would have gone back for that envelope. The one with my new address. The one wedged behind the bedroom drawer. The one I'd forgotten. But I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove to Andrea's office. 2 hours later, I signed the divorce papers in Andrea's office. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe that was just me. Andrea slid the final document across the desk. "Initial here, sign here." I did. She countersigned, notarized, filed everything into a manila folder. "You're officially divorced," she said. "And as of this morning, $8 million has been transferred into your account." I nodded. $8 million. I was free. Free to leave, free to start over, free to disappear. Andrea leaned back in her chair. "What's next for you, Charlotte?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I have 30 days to figure it out." She smiled. "Good luck." I stood, shook her hand, and walked out. Outside, the sun was shining. The air smelled like rain and fresh-cut grass. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. For the next 30 days, I planned to disappear. No phone calls, no emails, no forwarding address. Just me. And for the first time in 7 years, that felt like enough. 3 weeks after I signed away my marriage, I landed in Portland, Oregon with 2 suitcases and a clean slate. The city smelled like rain and coffee and pine, everything Connecticut wasn't. Everything I needed. The studio apartment I'd rented sight unseen was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. Small but bright. Big windows that let in gray light even on the rainiest days. Hardwood floors that creaked when I walked. A kitchenette with a 2-burner stove. A bathroom with a clawfoot tub that looked like it had been salvaged from somewhere old and beautiful. It was perfect. I stood in the middle of the empty space that first afternoon, listening to the rain tap against the glass, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet, but peace. A quiet, still kind of calm that settled into my bones like the first breath after holding your breath too long. The first week I didn't do much. I unpacked slowly. 1 box a day, sometimes less. I'd pull out a book, something I'd read years ago and loved, and place it on the shelf. Then I'd sit on the floor and stare at it for an hour just looking, memorizing the fact that it was mine, that this space was mine, that my life for the first time in 7 years was entirely, completely mine. I started a routine. Every morning I walked, rain or shine, mostly rain. I'd pull on my jacket, lace up my sneakers, and wander the streets for an hour. Past brick buildings with ivy crawling up the sides. Past food carts selling breakfast burritos. Past bookstores with hand-painted signs. Past people who didn't know me, didn't know my name, didn't know where I'd come from or what I'd left behind. It was freedom in its purest form. There was a coffee shop on the corner, small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu. I started going there every afternoon. Same time, same order. Black coffee, no sugar. The barista, a guy in his 20s with a nose ring, tattooed forearms, and a kind smile, recognized me by the 3rd day. "Usual?" he asked, already reaching for a cup. I nodded. please." He handed it to me still warm, and I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. I liked the repetition, the predictability. After months of chaos, there was something grounding about knowing exactly what would happen next. Rebecca called every day. "Are you really okay?" she asked on day 4, her voice careful. I looked out the window at the wet streets, the gray sky, the people hurrying past with umbrellas. "I'm okay," I said. "Better than I thought." "You sound different." "Different how?" "Lighter, maybe. Like you're not carrying all that weight anymore." I smiled even though she couldn't see me. "Maybe I'm not." "Good," she said softly. "You deserve that." By the second week, I'd started to feel a little off. Nothing dramatic, just tired. More tired than usual. I'd go to bed at 9 and wake up at 8, still feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My limbs felt heavy. My head felt foggy. I chalked it up to stress, to everything my body had been through in the last 2 months. Then came the nausea. It started small, a queasy feeling in the mornings when I first woke up. I'd lie in bed for a few minutes, breathing slowly, waiting for it to pass. It always did, eventually. I ignored it, drank water, ate plain toast, assumed it was my body adjusting to the change, but it didn't go away. One morning, I stood at the window, watching the sunrise pink and gold bleeding into the gray clouds, and burst into tears for no reason. I stood there crying, watching the sky change colors, and couldn't explain why. I told myself it was adjustment, that I was processing. But deep down, I wondered. My neighbor knocked on my door that afternoon. "Hi," she said brightly when I opened it. "I'm Grace. Grace Miller. I live next door. Just wanted to say, welcome to the building." She was in her 50s with short gray hair, laugh lines around her eyes, and a warm smile. She held a plate of cookies wrapped in plastic. "I bake when I'm bored," she said, handing me the plate. "Hope you like chocolate chip." I took the plate, surprised. "Thank you, that's really sweet." "If you ever need anything sugar, a screwdriver, someone to talk to, just knock," she said. "I'm usually home." "I will," I said. "Thank you, Grace." She waved and disappeared back into her apartment. I closed the door and looked down at the cookies. Small kindnesses. I'd forgotten what they felt like. By the 3rd week, the nausea was worse. I couldn't finish breakfast. The smell of coffee, the thing I'd loved most about Portland, suddenly made my stomach turn. I'd walk past my favorite cafe and have to hold my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth until I was safely past. One morning, I stood in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired. My face was thinner than it had been a month ago. There were shadows under my eyes. Something's wrong, I thought. Or maybe right. I didn't know anymore. But my body was trying to tell me something. I leaned against the sink, gripping the edge, and thought back. When was the last time I'd had my period? I tried to remember. April. Late April, maybe. I counted backward. 6 weeks. 7. My heart started pounding. No, it wasn't possible. 7 years of trying. 3 failed IVF rounds. Specialists telling me gently, kindly that it would never happen naturally. But then I remembered. The last night with Stanley. It was weeks before I'd overheard the phone call with Brittany. We'd been distant for months, barely speaking. But that night, I don't even remember why we'd reached for each other in the dark. Like we were trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I pressed my hand to my stomach. No, it couldn't be. But my body didn't lie. That afternoon, I walked to the pharmacy. I pulled my hood low, kept my head down like I was buying something illegal. I grabbed 3 pregnancy tests off the shelf, 3, because I needed to be absolutely sure, and paid in cash. The cashier didn't even look at me. I walked home in the rain, clutching the plastic bag like it held something dangerous, something that could change everything. I told myself it was impossible. I told myself I was overreacting. But as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my hand still pressed to my stomach, I knew. Somehow I already knew. 3 test sticks lay on the bathroom counter like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. 2 pink lines, 2 pink lines, 2 pink lines, positive, 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 impossible. And yet here I was, pregnant. I stared at them for a long time. 10 minutes. 20. Waiting for the lines to fade, waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for reality to shift back into something that made sense. But they didn't fade. And reality didn't shift. 7 years. 7 years of single lines and tears and failed treatments. 7 years of doctors telling me kindly, gently that my body just wasn't built for this, that I should consider other options, that maybe it was time to let go. And now when I was alone, divorced 3,000 miles from everyone I'd ever known, now my body decided to work. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you make when the universe reveals itself to be utterly, absurdly unpredictable. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Charlie, breathe," she said before I could even speak. "Are you okay?" My voice cracked. "I'm pregnant." Silence. "Then are you sure?" "3 tests," I said. "All positive, 2 lines, all of them." "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Charlie. I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking. 7 years. 7 years I tried Rebecca. 3 failed IVF cycles. Thousands of dollars. Every month hoping, praying, and nothing. And now, when I'm finally free, when I'm finally building a new life without him, "This is a miracle," Rebecca said firmly. "Do you hear me? This is a miracle." I closed my eyes, pressing my palm against my stomach. "It doesn't feel like one. It feels terrifying. Terrifying and miraculous aren't mutually exclusive," she said gently. "Charlie, you need to see a doctor. Get it confirmed. Do you want me to fly out there?" Oh, I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted someone to hold my hand through this, to tell me what to do, to make the decisions I felt too scared to make. But another part, the part that had packed up 7 years of my life in 3 days and moved across the country alone, knew I had to do this myself. "No," I said quietly. "I need to do this myself." "All right," she said, "but you call me. The second you know anything, promise me." "I promise." "Charlie, yeah, this is good news. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it is." I looked down at the tests still sitting on the counter, their pink lines stark and undeniable. "I know," I said softly. I made an appointment at Riverside Medical Center for the next morning. The woman on the phone was cheerful and professional, asking routine questions about my last period, my symptoms, my medical history. I answered mechanically, my brain still struggling to catch up with reality. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hand on my stomach, trying to wrap my mind around the impossible fact growing inside me. A baby. After 7 years of nothing, there was finally something. Something real. Something mine. But it didn't feel real yet. It felt like a dream I might wake up from at any moment. The clinic was small, clean, and quiet. The kind of place that smelled like antiseptic and lavender, with soft lighting and abstract paintings on the walls. I checked in at the front desk and sat in the waiting room, gripping my purse like it might float away if I let go. A nurse called my name. "Charlotte." I stood, my legs unsteady. "I'm Emma," she said with a warm smile. "Dr. Palmer will see you now." I followed her down a narrow hallway into an exam room. Everything was pale blue and white, soft, clinical, safe. Emma took my blood pressure and temperature, making small talk about the weather, about Portland, about how I was adjusting to the city. I answered politely, but my mind was elsewhere. Dr. Palmer walked in a few minutes later. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a low bun. She shook my hand firmly. "Charlotte," she said, her voice warm and steady. "I understand you took a home pregnancy test." I nodded. 3, actually, all positive. She smiled. "Let's confirm with a blood test and an ultrasound then. We'll get you some answers." Emma drew my blood while Dr. Palmer asked questions. When was my last period? Had I been experiencing symptoms? Any cramping or bleeding nausea? I answered as best I could. My brain felt foggy, like I was moving through water. Then Dr. Palmer asked, "How long have you been trying to conceive?" I looked at her, and something in my chest tightened. 7 years. 3 failed IVF rounds. I was told it probably wasn't going to happen. Her expression softened immediately. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," I said quietly. "And now I don't understand. Why now?" "Sometimes the body knows when the time is right," Dr. Palmer said gently. "Stress, anxiety, pressure, they can all interfere with conception. When you let go, when your body finally relaxes, things can fall into place. Let's see what we're working with." She gestured to the exam table. I lay down, pulled my shirt up, exposing my stomach. Emma dimmed the lights. Doctor. Palmer squeezed gel onto my abdomen, cold, slippery, and pressed the ultrasound probe against my skin. I held my breath. The screen flickered. Gray and black shapes moved across it like shadows underwater. Dr. Palmer moved the probe, slowly, carefully, her eyes fixed on the screen. I watched her face, searching for any sign of bad news, of complications of the other shoe dropping. Then she paused. She moved the probe again, adjusted the angle, checked the screen, frowned slightly, not in concern, but in concentration. "Well, Charlotte," she said, and there was something in her voice, something warm and careful. "I have good news. You're definitely pregnant, about 10 weeks along based on measurements." I exhaled, relief flooding through me. And she paused, her eyes still on the screen. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "There are 2 heartbeats." The room went silent. I stared at her. "What?" She turned the screen toward me and pointed. 2 tiny flickering lights, pulsing in rhythm, side by side. "Twins," she said gently. "You're carrying twins." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared at the screen, at those 2 tiny lights beating in perfect sync, and felt something break open inside me. Something I'd been holding closed for 7 years. Fear, grief, hope, longing, all of it, rushing out at once. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. 2 strong heartbeats, Dr. Palmer said softly. "Healthy, thriving. Congratulations, Charlotte." I tried to speak, couldn't. My throat was too tight, my chest too full. I finally managed my voice, barely a whisper. "That's impossible." "Rare," Dr. Palmer corrected gently, "but not impossible. Sometimes when conditions are right, the body surprises us." I looked at the screen again. 2 tiny shapes, side by side, 2 hearts beating in unison. 2 lives, 2 miracles, mine. My voice cracked. "Can I hear them?" Dr. Palmer nodded and turned on the sound. A soft, rapid thumping filled the room, like the sound of horses galloping fast and steady and impossibly beautifully alive. I closed my eyes and listened, and for the first time in years, maybe the first time since I'd left Connecticut, I felt whole. Emma helped me sit up afterward, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Dr. Palmer printed the ultrasound image and handed it to me. 2 tiny shapes side by side, surrounded by darkness. "You'll need to come back in a few weeks for another scan," Dr. Palmer said. "But everything looks healthy, strong. You're doing great." I nodded, still holding the printout like it might disappear if I let go. Dr. Palmer hesitated. Then gently, "Is there a father in the picture? Someone we should contact?" Jens West." I looked at the picture, at those 2 tiny shapes. And I thought about Stanley, about Dorothy and Charles and Nathan Pierce, about the $8 million and the legal threats and the cruelty, about the life I'd left behind. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "He doesn't need to know, not yet, maybe not ever." Dr. Palmer nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "All right, it's your decision. Your body, your pregnancy, your choice." "Thank you," I whispered. I left the clinic with the ultrasound printout tucked into my purse and a folder of prenatal information under my arm. The sun was shining. The air smelled like rain and pine and possibility. I walked slowly back to my apartment, my hand resting on my stomach, feeling the secret tucked inside me. 2 secrets, actually. 2 heartbeats. 2 lives that no one else knew about yet. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. I'd almost forgotten what it was. Hope. 3 weeks after I learned about the twins, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Rebecca. Her voice was shaking. "Charlotte," she said, they know about the babies." My blood ran cold. "How?" I whispered. She told me. And slowly, piece by piece, I reconstructed the moment my secret stopped being mine. "Walter called me," Rebecca said. "He thought you should know." I sat up in bed, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. "Know what?" "Stanley was cleaning out the bedroom," she said carefully, "to prepare for Brittany. He found an envelope." My heart dropped. "What envelope?" "Your new address," Rebecca said quietly. health insurance paperwork for Portland, Oregon. Oh God, I forgot, I whispered. I was packing so fast I must have... It fell behind the nightstand drawer, Rebecca said. Walter said Stanley pulled the drawer all the way out and found it wedged in the back. I closed my eyes. I remembered that morning, the rush, the hurry, the desperate need to leave before I changed my mind. I'd grabbed jewelry, old letters, reading glasses. I thought I'd gotten everything, but I hadn't. What did it say? I asked. Your new address in Portland, Rebecca said. Pearl District, and your new health insurance information. I felt my stomach drop. So he knows where I am. Yes, Rebecca said. And Charlotte, he hired someone, a private investigator. The words hit me like a punch. What? Walter overheard the phone call, Rebecca said. Stanley called Dorothy the second he found the envelope. And Dorothy, she didn't waste time. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Charlotte. Rebecca's voice was careful. Are you okay? No, I said. I'm not okay. I closed my eyes and tried to picture it. Stanley alone in our old bedroom, I still thought of it as hours pulling out furniture, erasing my traces, making room for Brittany, for the baby that wasn't even his, and then the envelope. I imagined him picking it up, frowning, turning it over in his hands, then opening it, seeing my new address, Pearl District, Portland, Oregon, the health insurance card with my name, Oregon residency paperwork. I pictured him sitting there staring at the proof that I'd built a new life. Without him, 3,000 miles away. And then I knew what he'd do next. He'd call his mother, and Dorothy would hire someone to find out what I was hiding. Walter said there was more. Rebecca continued, her voice careful. Dorothy hired a private investigator, someone discreet. They've been watching you for 2 weeks. My blood turned to ice. Watching me, following you, taking photos. They know you've been going to Riverside Medical Center, multiple appointments. I felt sick. They've been following me. The investigator reported back 3 days ago, Rebecca said quietly. Charlotte, they know it's an OB/GYN clinic. They know you're pregnant. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling violated, exposed. Someone had been watching me, following me through the streets of Portland, taking pictures of me walking into that clinic, recording my appointments, my private sacred moments. And the twins, I whispered. Rebecca's voice was barely audible. Walter said the investigator got access to some records. Medical privacy laws don't mean much when you have enough money. They know Charlotte. They know it's twins. I couldn't breathe. Walter overheard part of the meeting, Rebecca said. Dorothy and Charles came to the estate immediately after they got the report. Of course they did. What did they say? Rebecca hesitated. Charlotte, I don't think you want to... Tell me. She sighed. Walter heard Dorothy through the study door. She said, those children carry Ashford blood. We can't let them go. We'll bring her back, whatever it takes. My hands clenched into fists. They can't, I said. My voice was tight. I signed papers. I took the money. I left. Charlotte, they have lawyers, Rebecca said gently. Resources. Dorothy said, and I'm quoting Walter here, she's alone in Oregon with no support. We'll make an offer she can't refuse. I felt rage rising in my chest, hot and sharp and suffocating. I'm not alone, I said. I know, Rebecca said softly, but they don't see it that way. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was just starting to rise over Portland, pink and gold lights spilling over the buildings. I'd thought I was free. I'd thought I'd escaped. But they'd found me. Even from 3,000 miles away, they'd found me. What else did Walter say? I asked. Rebecca hesitated again. He said Charles told Stanley to hire a lawyer, that they'd file for custody the second the babies were born, that you'd signed away your rights to the Ashford estate, but the children hadn't, that they were entitled to the family's protection. Protection, I repeated bitterly. They want to control them, own them. I know. They spent 7 years blaming me for not giving them an heir. I said, my voice shaking. And now that I finally have what they wanted, they're going to try to take it from me. Charlotte, they're not going to let me go, I said. My voice cracked. Not now. Not when I'm carrying the heirs they spent 7 years demanding from me. Rebecca didn't answer because she knew I was right. I stood there for a long time after we hung up, staring out the window, my hand on my stomach, feeling the two tiny lives growing inside me. Mine, not theirs, mine. I thought about Dorothy's voice through the study door. We'll bring her back, whatever it takes. I thought about the private investigator following me, watching me, photographing me without my knowledge. I thought about the choice I'd made 3 weeks ago to keep the pregnancy secret, to protect these babies from the family that had tried to erase me. And I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Because if they'd known from the beginning, they would have controlled everything. My pregnancy, my body, my children. But now I had time, a head start. 3 months to prepare, to plan, to build a life for these babies that didn't include the Ashfords. I picked up my phone. Andrea Stone answered on the second ring. "Charlotte," she said, "it's early. Is everything okay?" "They found out," I said. My voice was steady now, calm. "About the pregnancy, the twins." There was a long pause. Then Andrea's voice calm but serious. "Charlotte, we need to prepare. If they're coming for those babies, they won't play nice, and it won't be quiet." "I know," I said. "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "Yes." "Good. We'll start building your case." "But Charlotte..." "Yeah. This is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that?" I looked out the window at the sunrise, at the city I'd chosen, at the life I was building. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 days after I learned they'd found out. I was making lunch badly because I had no appetite when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Nathan Pierce's voice was exactly as I remembered it, cold, professional, and threatening. I was standing at the kitchen counter, staring at a half-made sandwich I had no intention of eating. The smell of turkey made my stomach turn. Everything made my stomach turn these days. 16 weeks, 4 months. The twins were growing, and so was the nausea. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment. Let it ring, then ring again. Finally, I picked up. "Hello, Mrs. Ashford." The voice was smooth, formal, unnervingly calm. "Nathan Pierce." I closed my eyes. "It's just Charlotte now." "Of course," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't care either way. "We need to discuss your situation." I felt my jaw tighten. "What situation?" "You're pregnant," he said simply, "with twins. The Ashford family has interests tied to those children." My hand gripped the phone so hard it hurt. "How did you—" I stopped myself, took a breath. "That's private medical information. How we obtained it doesn't matter." Nathan said, his voice still calm, still professional. "What matters is that we're prepared to work with you to ensure the best outcome for everyone involved." "You have no right—" I said, my voice low and shaking. "Mrs. Charlotte," he corrected himself. "I understand this is difficult, but let me be clear. We're prepared to offer you an additional $5 million in exchange for shared custody. The children will be raised with access to both parents and will carry the Ashford name." I stared at the sandwich on the counter, at the kitchen I'd built in this new life, at the window overlooking Portland. "They're my children," I said. "Biologically, they're also Stanley Ashford's children," Nathan said. "He has rights. He gave up those rights when he cheated on me and paid me to disappear." I shot back. "Family law doesn't work that way, Charlotte," Nathan said, and for the first time I heard something in his voice. Not sympathy, just honesty. "Children have rights to their fathers. Fathers have rights to their children. The divorce settlement didn't address custody because there were no children at the time. That changes things." I pressed my hand to my stomach. "We can settle this amicably," Nathan continued. $5 million shared custody. The children will have access to the Ashford Estate Resources education. You'll retain primary physical custody. They'll spend holidays with their father. It's reasonable." "Reasonable," I repeated. "Yes. You want me to hand over my children to the family that called me a mistake and paid me to leave." "I want you to consider what's best for the children," Nathan said. I felt rage boiling up in my chest, hot and sharp and suffocating. "What's best for them," I said slowly, "is to be as far away from that family as possible." Nathan was silent for a moment, then, "Charlotte, I strongly advise you to reconsider. The Ashford family has resources, legal resources, financial resources. If this goes to court, then we'll go to court, I said. You'll lose, maybe, I said. Or maybe I'll win. Maybe a judge will see exactly what I see: a family that wants to control two innocent children because they carry a name. Not because they're loved, because they're assets. That's not fair, Nathan said, and for the first time his voice cracked. Just a little. Stanley wants to know his children. Then he should have thought about that before he destroyed our marriage, I said. Another silence. Charlotte, Nathan said carefully, we can do this the easy way, or we can go to court. And I assure you the Ashford family has resources you can't imagine. They will fight. They will win. And you will lose more than just custody. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a reality. I took a breath, let it out slowly. Tell Mrs. Ashford this, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Those babies are mine. Mine. If your family contacts me again, I'll file for a restraining order. And if you want a legal battle, bring it. You'll lose. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I set the phone down on the counter and stared at it, half expecting it to ring again immediately. It didn't. I stood there for a long time, breathing, trying to calm the adrenaline flooding my system. Then I picked up the phone and called Andrea. She answered on the first ring. Charlotte, they're coming for my children, I said. Tell me everything. I did. Every word, every threat, every horrible, calculated sentence Nathan Pierce had said. When I finished, Andrea was silent for a moment. Then, don't panic, we have options. The divorce was finalized with no mention of pregnancy. You have sole custody by default. Stanley would have to petition the court for paternity testing and custody rights. That takes time, and we can fight it. But they have money, I said, resources. So do you, Andrea said. $8 million. And more importantly, you have the law on your side. You're the mother. You carried those babies. You're raising them. No judge is going to hand custody to a man who cheated on you, paid you to leave, and then hired a private investigator to stalk you. I felt a tiny flicker of hope. But Charlotte, Andrea said, and her voice was serious, they won't give up easily. You need to prepare for a fight, a long one, an ugly one. I know, I said. Good. Come to my office tomorrow. We'll start building your defense. Okay. And Charlotte? Yeah. Don't answer any more calls from unknown numbers. If they want to talk to you, they go through me. Understood. Understood. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hand on my stomach, feeling the two tiny lives growing inside me. They were mine, only mine, and I would fight for them. I kept checking my phone, waiting for another call, another threat. But the phone stayed silent until 6 a.m. the next morning. When it finally buzzed, I grabbed it immediately, heart pounding. Not an unknown number this time. Rebecca, I answered. Hello? Call me now, she said, her voice tight and urgent. Then she hung up. My blood ran cold. Before I reveal what Rebecca discovered that morning, I need to know you're still with me. Comment number 1 if you think Brittany planned this betrayal from the start, or comment 2 if you believe she panicked when things fell apart. Your vote matters. I want to see what you think before the truth comes out. Please note the following story includes some fictionalized elements and may not reflect entirely real events. If you'd prefer not to continue, feel free to pause here and explore other content. Brittany's baby isn't Stanley's. Rebecca's words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I sank onto the couch. What? DNA test. Rebecca said, her voice still tight with urgency. 0% match. Charlotte Stanley's not the father. She lied about everything. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My brain was trying to process the words, but they didn't make sense. Charlotte. Rebecca's voice pulled me back. Are you there? Yeah, I said faintly. I'm here. Tell me everything. She did. Walter called me an hour ago, Rebecca said. He thought you should know before the family does anything else. I pressed my hand to my forehead. What happened? Walter noticed Brittany had been acting strange, Rebecca said. Constantly on her phone, sneaking calls, disappearing for hours at a time. He didn't think much of it at first. She was pregnant, emotional, whatever. Okay, I said. But then he saw something. Rebecca continued. A text notification on her phone. She'd left it on the counter in the kitchen. The screen lit up with a message from Jay. "How much longer do I have to wait?" I frowned. "Jay, that's what Walter thought," Rebecca said. He didn't know who Jay was, but he felt wrong about it. He thought about you, about what happened, and he decided to take a screenshot. He sent it to Dorothy. I said, already knowing where this was going. "Yes." I leaned back against the couch. "What did Dorothy do?" "She ordered a DNA test," Rebecca said. "Prenatal. You can do them from 9 weeks. Dorothy wasn't taking any chances. She wanted proof. And," Rebecca's voice was quiet, "probability of paternity 0%. I closed my eyes. "Stanley isn't the father," Rebecca said. "Brittany lied about everything." I tried to picture it. Dorothy standing in that pristine study with the DNA results in her hand. Her face stone cold, her voice sharp as a blade. "Who is Jay Brittany?" Rebecca continued, and I could see it all unfolding in my mind. "Walter said Brittany tried to deny it at first," Rebecca said. "Said the message was from a friend, that it was nothing. But then Charles threw the DNA results on the table." I imagined Brittany's face going pale, her hands shaking. "Walter said she broke down," Rebecca continued. "Started screaming, said Stanley was an easy target, that she and Jeremy Collins, her longtime boyfriend, needed money, that they'd planned the whole thing." My stomach turned. "She actually said that?" I asked. "Word for word," Rebecca said. And then Walter quoted this part. "Exactly," she said. "You were all so desperate for an heir, you didn't even question it." I felt something twist in my chest. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness. "What did Stanley say?" I asked. Rebecca hesitated. "Walter said he just sat there, staring at her. And finally he asked, 'Everything was a lie?' I could picture his face, the confusion, the hurt. 'And Brittany?' I asked. "She laughed," Rebecca said. "Walter said she actually laughed. And then she said, 'Not everything. I really did love your money.'" I pressed my hand to my mouth. "Dorothy told security to escort her out," Rebecca continued. "Told her she'd get nothing, that if she tried to blackmail the family, they'd bury her. Brittany left screaming, threatening lawsuits, threatening to go to the press, but Dorothy just stood there, watching her go." I sat there in silence for a long moment. "Charlotte," Rebecca's voice was soft, "are you okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "because I didn't." Part of me wanted to laugh, the absurdity of it, the poetic justice. The woman who'd stolen my husband had been lying the entire time. The baby that destroyed my marriage didn't even exist. Part of me wanted to cry for Stanley because he'd been used too, manipulated, lied to. But mostly I just felt empty. "He chose her over me," I said quietly. "And she was a lie from the start." "I know," Rebecca said softly. I looked out the window at the rain streaking down the glass, the gray Portland sky. "The baby they destroyed my marriage over didn't even exist," I said. "And now my children, the real heirs they'd always wanted, are the ones they're trying to take." Rebecca didn't answer, because there was nothing to say. We talked for a few more minutes. Rebecca filled in details. Told me Walter was worried Dorothy would try something drastic, that the family was humiliated, that Stanley had locked himself in his room and refused to come out. When we finally hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time, just sitting, staring at nothing. I thought about the night I'd overheard Brittany's voice on the phone, the way my world had shattered in an instant, the way I'd packed up 7 years of my life in 3 days and disappeared, all because of a lie. And now Stanley knew, Dorothy knew, Charles knew. They knew what they'd done, what they'd destroyed, and for what? Nothing. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the slight curve there, the 2 tiny lives growing inside me, the real heirs, the ones they'd spent 7 years trying to get me to give them. And now that I finally had them, they wanted to take them away. I picked up my phone and called Andrea. "Charlotte," she answered immediately. "Are you okay?" "Brittany's baby isn't Stanley's," I said. Silence. "Then what?" I told her everything. The DNA test, the confrontation, Jeremy Collins, the lie. When I finished, Andrea was quiet for a moment. "This changes things," she said finally. "How?" "It proves they're desperate," Andrea said. It proves they've been manipulated before. And it proves Stanley has a history of poor judgment when it comes to women claiming to carry his children. I felt a flicker of hope. Can we use it? Absolutely, Andrea said. If they try to fight for custody, we can argue that Stanley's judgment is compromised, that the family is dysfunctional, that they're motivated by control, not love. Good, I said. Charlotte, Andrea said carefully, this is a win for us, but don't underestimate them. They're humiliated, and humiliated people do dangerous things. I know, I said, but I didn't really believe it. I thought that was the end. Brittany exposed. Stanley humiliated. My point proven. I thought they'd leave me alone, too ashamed, too embarrassed to keep fighting. I was wrong. 3 days later, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I found out just how wrong I was. The car came out of nowhere. I saw the headlights. That's all I remember before the impact. 1 second, I was driving home from the grocery store, windshield wipers battling the rain. The next, screeching metal shattering glass, my body thrown against the seatbelt. And then darkness. It was a Tuesday evening, early August, 7 months pregnant. 28 weeks. The twins were the size of eggplants according to the pregnancy app on my phone. Their lungs were developing. Their eyes could open and close. They could hear my voice. I'd been thinking about names on the drive home. Noah and Ethan, maybe, or something else. Something that felt like hope instead of history. The rain was coming down hard, the kind of rain that turned Portland streets into rivers. My windshield wipers were on full speed, and I could barely see 5 feet ahead. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like smeared paint. Groceries filled the trunk, apples, yogurt, crackers. The only things I could stomach these days. I was humming, some song I didn't know the name of, something soft and mindless. I turned onto Elm Street, heading toward my apartment. I didn't see the black SUV until it was too late. It came from a side street on my right. No headlights, no brake lights, no warning. Just a dark shape hurtling toward me through the rain. I saw it in the last second. No time to brake. No time to swerve. No time to do anything but brace. The collision hit the passenger side of my car like a bomb going off. The sound was deafening. Metal screaming. Glass exploding inward. My body was thrown sideways against the seatbelt, the force so violent I felt something crack in my ribs, a sharp, white-hot pain. The airbag exploded in my face, slamming into my nose and mouth. My car spun. Once, twice, I couldn't tell. Then it slammed into something solid, a lamppost. The world stopped spinning. Everything went still. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then one thought, the babies. I pressed my hand to my stomach, gasping for air. Please, I whispered, please be okay. I couldn't feel them moving. Please. The darkness pulled at me, and then it swallowed me whole. I woke to sirens, rain on my face, voices shouting. Someone was pulling at my door, hands on my shoulders, a flashlight in my eyes. Ma'am, can you hear me? I tried to speak. The babies, I managed. I'm pregnant, twins, 28 weeks. The paramedic's face changed. Urgency replaced calm. We need to get her out now, he shouted. Pregnant, 28 weeks, twins, move. They moved fast. A neck brace, a stretcher, rain soaking through my clothes. I kept my hand on my stomach the entire time. Please, please, please. The ambulance ride was a blur. Sirens, lights, someone checking my pulse, someone else talking into a radio. Riverside Medical Center. ETA 4 minutes. 28-year-old female pregnant with twins. Motor vehicle collision, possible rib fractures. I closed my eyes. Please. Dr. Palmer was waiting when they wheeled me into the emergency room. I saw her face and almost cried with relief. Charlotte. She said, her voice calm but urgent. We're going to check on the babies right now. Can you tell me where it hurts? Everywhere, I whispered. My ribs, my side. But the babies, please. We'll check them first, she said. They moved me onto a bed, pulled up my shirt, squeezed cold gel onto my stomach. Dr. Palmer pressed the ultrasound probe against my skin. I held my breath. The screen flickered, gray shapes, shadows, and then 2 tiny heartbeats, flickering like twin stars. Thump, 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 thump. Steady, strong, alive. I sobbed. They're okay. Dr. Palmer said softly. Both heartbeats are strong. No signs of placental abruption. No bleeding. They're fighters, Charlotte, just like their mother. I couldn't stop crying. You're sure? I'm sure, she said, squeezing my hand. We'll keep you overnight for observation. But right now, they're safe. Safe. I closed my eyes and let the relief wash over me. They moved me to a private room an hour later. My ribs were bruised, not broken. My shoulder was sprained. I had cuts on my face from the airbag and glass. But the babies were okay. That was all that mattered. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when there was a knock on the door. A man in a suit stepped in. Mid-40s, graying hair, serious expression. Ms. Charlotte, he said. I'm Detective Morrison. Portland PD. Do you have a moment? I nodded. He pulled a chair up beside the bed. We've been investigating the collision, he said. Do you remember anything about the vehicle that hit you? I closed my eyes. It was a black SUV, big. It came out of nowhere, no headlights. Detective Morrison nodded, writing in a notebook. We reviewed traffic camera footage from the area. That car followed you for 3 blocks before the collision. My blood ran cold. What? It followed you, he repeated. Stayed 2 cars behind, no headlights. And when you turned onto Elm Street, it accelerated and ran the stop sign, deliberately. I stared at him. You're saying this wasn't an accident? Detective Morrison said, his voice calm but firm. Someone deliberately caused this collision. This was attempted vehicular assault. I couldn't breathe. Who? I whispered. That's what we're trying to determine, he said. The license plate was fake. The vehicle was found abandoned 3 miles away. It was a rental. Fake ID paid in cash. I pressed my hand to my stomach. Someone had tried to hurt me. To hurt them. To kill us. Detective Morrison pulled a tablet out of his bag. We do have one lead, he said. Footage from the rental agency's security camera. The person who rented the car 2 days ago. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. The image was grainy but clear enough. A woman, blonde hair pulled back. Sunglasses, a black jacket. I stopped breathing. I knew that face. Do you know this person? Detective Morrison asked. I nodded slowly, my voice barely a whisper. Her name is Brittany. That name echoed in my head all night. Brittany. I lay in the hospital bed, the twins moving inside me alive, thank God, and tried to understand why. Why would she do this? What did she have to gain? By morning, I had my answer, and it was worse than I thought. Detective Morrison came back at 8 a.m. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights, heard screeching metal, felt the impact. But the twins kept moving, shifting, kicking, reminding me they were still there, still safe. Morrison knocked softly before entering. He looked tired, like he'd been up all night, too. Ms. Charlotte, he said. Do you have a few minutes? I nodded. Did you find her? We did, he said. Brittany Collins was arrested at 6 a.m. this morning at a motel near the airport. She and Jeremy Collins were packing. They had 2 one-way tickets to Mexico City. Flight was supposed to leave at noon. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She was running. Yes, Morrison said. He pulled out his tablet and sat in the chair beside my bed. We've been reviewing her digital footprint, social media, text messages, and we found quite a bit. He turned the screen toward me, a screenshot of a social media post, Brittany's account, posted 2 days before the accident. Some people think they can just leave and win. Watch what happens next. I stared at it. She was planning this. Yes, Morrison said. He swiped to the next image. A text message thread between Brittany and someone labeled J in her phone. Brittany, they humiliated me, threw me out like trash. I'll make all of them pay. Jay, baby, it's not worth it. Let's just go. Brittany, no. She thinks she won. She thinks she gets to walk away with everything. I'm not letting that happen. Morrison swiped again. Another message. Brittany, if I can't get the Ashford money, neither will she. I felt sick. She tried to hurt me, I whispered. Just because she got caught lying? Revenge, Morrison said simply. She blamed you for her exposure, for losing the Ashford family's money and protection. In her mind, you were the reason her plan fell apart. I pressed my hand to my stomach. She could have killed my babies. I know, Morrison said. His voice was gentle. But she didn't. and now she's facing multiple felony charges: attempted vehicular homicide, assault with a deadly weapon, fleeing the scene of an accident. If convicted, she's looking at 15 to 20 years. I closed my eyes. Good. Morrison stood. I'll keep you updated on the case. If you need anything, call me. He handed me his card and left. I sat there for a long time staring at the wall. Brittany had tried to kill me. Not out of desperation, not out of self-defense, out of pure calculated revenge. Andrea Stone arrived an hour later. "Charlotte," she said, rushing to my bedside. "I came as soon as I heard." "I'm okay," I said. "The babies are okay." "Thank God," Andrea said. She set her briefcase down and pulled a chair close. "I've been in contact with Detective Morrison. This changes everything." "How?" "The Ashfords can't use this against you," Andrea said. "They can't claim you're unfit or unsafe. Brittany acted alone. This has nothing to do with your ability to parent. If anything, it proves you're a target that you need protection, not scrutiny." I hadn't thought of that. "So they can't use the accident to take the babies?" I asked. "No," Andrea said firmly. "In fact, if they try, we can argue that their association with Brittany, the woman Stanley was involved with, puts the children at risk, not you." I felt a flicker of hope. "Really? Really?" Andrea said. "This is a win for us, Charlotte. A terrible, awful win, but a win." My phone buzzed on the bedside table. I glanced at it, a text from Rebecca. "Rebecca Stanley's calling. Do you want me to answer?" I stared at the screen. Stanley. Of course he knew. Of course he'd heard about the accident. "What is it?" Andrea asked. "Stanley," I said. "He's calling. Do you want to talk to him?" I thought about it. About everything he'd done. Everything he'd chosen. "No," I said. "I don't want to talk to him." My phone rang. Rebecca's name. I answered. "Hey." "Charlotte," Rebecca said. "Stanley's here." I sat up. "Where?" "Downstairs, in the hospital lobby. He flew in this morning. He's asking to see you." My stomach dropped. "Tell him no," I said. "Charlotte." "Tell him I need time," I said. My voice was firm. "Tell him I'm not ready." Rebecca hesitated. "Okay, I'll tell him." I hung up. Andrea was watching me. "That was smart," she said. "I don't want to see him," I said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "You don't have to," Andrea said. "This is your recovery, your choice." But Stanley didn't leave. I learned later from Rebecca, who heard from Walter, that he'd checked into a hotel 3 blocks from the hospital. To wait. To be nearby in case I changed my mind. I didn't. I spent 2 more days in the hospital. The twins were monitored constantly. Every heartbeat, every movement. Dr. Palmer came by twice a day to check on us. "They're doing beautifully," she said on the 3rd morning. "Strong, resilient, just like you." "When can I go home?" I asked. "Today," she said with a smile. "As long as you promise to rest. No stress, no heavy lifting, and follow-up appointments every week until delivery." "I promise," I said. Rebecca came to pick me up that afternoon. She helped me into the passenger seat, buckled me in like I was fragile. Maybe I was. We drove through Portland in silence. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. I stared out the window, my hand on my stomach. The twins were still moving, still alive, still mine. I was home for less than an hour when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello." Charlotte, a woman's voice. Hesitant. Familiar. My heart stopped. "Mom." "Yes," she said. Her voice cracked. "Charlotte, I heard about the accident. Are you okay? Are the babies okay?" I couldn't speak. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in 7 years. Not since the day I married Stanley. The day she told me I was making a mistake. The day I told her I never wanted to see her again. "Charlotte," she said again. "Please talk to me." I closed my eyes. "I'm okay," I said quietly. "The babies are okay." "Thank God," she whispered. "Charlotte, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to call, but I had to. I had to know you were safe." I didn't know what to say. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Please." I looked out the window at the Portland skyline, at the life I'd built without her. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I understand," she said. "But Charlotte, I'm here. If you need me, I'm here." She gave me her number, made me promise to think about it. And then she hung up. I sat there for a long time staring at my phone. Brittany was in jail. Stanley was 3 blocks away waiting. And my mother, who I hadn't spoken to in 7 years, was asking for a second chance. The twins kicked. I pressed my hand to my stomach and closed my eyes. Everything was changing, and I didn't know if I was ready. Charlotte, sweetheart, it's Mom. 7 years. It had been 7 years since I'd last heard that voice. 7 years since I'd left the Ashford family, my real family, the one I was born into, because they made me choose Stanley or them. I chose wrong. And now, lying in a hospital bed after someone tried to harm me and my children, I heard my mother's voice crack with tears. Please don't hang up. I didn't, but I couldn't speak either. Charlotte, she said again, are you there? I'm here, I whispered. I heard her exhale, shaky and relieved. Thank God, Charlotte. I never stopped looking for you, sweetheart. When I saw the news, the accident, I had to call. It took me almost dying for you to reach out. I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice was broken. No, she said. I've wanted to call every day for 7 years, but you said if I didn't accept Stanley, you'd never contact me again, and I didn't want to push you further away. I closed my eyes. I remembered that conversation, the ultimatum I'd given, the anger, the hurt. You were right about him, I said quietly. I know, she whispered, but that doesn't mean I was right about how I handled it. There was another voice in the background, deeper, familiar. Is that her, my father? Let me talk to her. Richard, please. A rustling sound, then my father's voice. Charlotte. His voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion underneath. We were wrong, your mother and I. We were so wrong. I didn't know what to say. We were right about him, he continued. But we were wrong about how we handled it. We should have supported you, not pushed you away. We should have been there, and we weren't. And I'm sorry. I felt tears sliding down my face. Dad, I whispered. We love you, Charlotte, he said. We never stopped loving you. My mother's voice came back. Charlotte, there's something else. Something I need to tell you. I braced myself. I'm sick, she said. Stage 3 breast cancer. I've been on chemo for 4 months. The doctors say, I still have time, but not forever. My breath caught. Mom, I don't want to close my eyes without fixing this mistake, she said, her voice breaking, without meeting my grandchildren. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the twins shift beneath my palm. I'm having twins, I said, my voice barely audible. 2 boys. I heard her sob, a full unguarded sound. Oh, Charlotte, she whispered, can we see you? Please. I looked out the window at the Portland sky, gray and heavy with rain. Yes, I said. Yes, you can. They arrived that afternoon. Rebecca helped me sit up in bed, fixed my hair, brought me water. She squeezed my hand before she left. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. You will be, she said. When the knock came, I almost didn't answer. But then the door opened, and there they were. My mother, my father. Catherine looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. She wore a soft gray headscarf over her head, and her face was pale. But her eyes were the same, warm and brown and full of love. Richard stood beside her, his hand on her back. His hair was grayer, his shoulders a little more stooped, but his expression was the same steady calm I'd grown up with. Charlotte, my mother whispered. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I started crying. She crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around me, carefully, gently, like I might break. I'm so sorry, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, I sobbed. My father joined us, his arms around both of us. The 3 of us standing there, holding each other, crying, like the world was ending and beginning all at once. We're here now, he said quietly. We're not going anywhere. We spent that entire afternoon talking. Really talking, for the first time in 7 years. I told them everything, about Stanley, about Brittany, about the divorce and the money and the twins, about Nathan Pierce's call and Dorothy's threats and the car that had tried to kill me. They listened. They didn't interrupt. They didn't judge. And when I was done, my mother reached across the bed and took my hand. You're so strong, she said, stronger than I ever was. I don't feel strong, I admitted. You are... My father said. Look at everything you've survived, everything you've built. I looked down at my stomach, at the twins growing inside me. I'm scared, I whispered. Of course you are, my mother said. But you're not alone, not anymore. We're here, my father said. Whatever you need, however long you need it, we're here. I believed them. As the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I sat with my parents on either side of my hospital bed. My mother told me about her treatment, about the good days and the bad days, about the hope that the chemo was working. My father told me about their house, about the garden my mother had planted, about how they'd kept my old room exactly the way I'd left it. Just in case, he said. In case of what? Asked. In case you came home, my mother said simply. I squeezed her hand. I'm home now, I said. She smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in 7 years. Yes, she said, you are. When they finally left that evening, I sat alone in the quiet hospital room. The twins were moving, shifting, kicking. I pressed my hand to my stomach and thought about everything that had happened. Brittany was in jail. Stanley was 3 blocks away, waiting for me to forgive him. Dorothy and Charles were in Connecticut plotting their next move. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had my mother, my father, Rebecca, Andrea, Dr. Palmer. I had my children. I didn't need the Ashfords. I never did. Dorothy Ashford showed up unannounced. Of course she did. That was her style, control, surprise, intimidation. But when I opened the door of my Portland apartment 4 weeks after the accident and saw her standing there, I didn't feel fear. I just felt tired. She looked different, older. Her silver hair was still perfectly coiffed, but there was something around her eyes, deeper lines, shadows of exhaustion that made her seem smaller, frailer. Not the towering figure who'd terrified me for 7 years. Charlotte, she said, her voice steady but careful. Do you have a moment? I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the doorknob. My belly was basketball-sized at 32 weeks, both babies kicking gently against my ribs as if they knew something important was happening. I wanted to slam the door in her face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to leave and never come back, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the door wider and stepped aside. Not here, I said evenly. There's a coffee shop around the corner. We'll talk there. Dorothy nodded, not arguing. That was the first sign that something had changed. The coffee shop near my apartment was a small, cozy space with wooden tables and the rich smell of espresso hanging in the air. I'd become a regular here it was, where I escaped on mornings when the apartment felt too quiet, when loneliness pressed down on my shoulders like a wet cloak. But today, it felt like safe territory, neutral ground. Not my apartment where Dorothy could invade, not the Ashford mansion where I'd always felt small and judged. We sat across from each other. I ordered an herbal tea. Dorothy ordered nothing. You look well, Dorothy began, but her voice lacked its usual edge. It wasn't a compliment, just an observation. I didn't respond. I waited. She drew in a long, difficult breath, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled slightly on the first few words. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. About you. About how I treated you. About what I said. I stared at her, saying nothing, not moving. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. An apology can't erase 7 years. I said, my voice flat but firm. It can't erase what you called me, what you tried to do to me. I know, Dorothy said, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw something close to regret cross her face. But I still have to say it. You were right. I called you a mistake. I hear myself saying those words every night when I can't sleep. I studied her, searching for any sign of manipulation of the calculated performance Dorothy Ashford usually delivered. But her eyes weren't cold, not sharp. They were tired, maybe even in pain. Do you know why I came here? Dorothy asked quietly. No, I replied, but I'm sure you'll tell me. She leaned back, her hands folded on the table, fingers laced together tightly. When I heard about the accident that someone had deliberately tried to harm you and those children, I realized something. Those babies could have died. And it would have been my fault. I felt shock ripple through me but didn't let it show on my face. Because of my pride, she continued, her voice steadier now, as if she'd rehearsed these words. because of my need to control everything. I pushed you away. I belittled you. I tried to buy you off. And because of that, I made you a target. Brittany did that, I said coldly. Not you, but I created the environment for it to happen. Dorothy replied, her voice harder now. I fostered a house where money mattered more than people, where bloodline mattered more than character, where power was prioritized over love, and then I was surprised when it bred people like Brittany who thought they could steal, lie, and even kill for a piece of the fortune. I looked at her, searching for holes in her words, but found none. That didn't mean I trusted her. Not yet. You should have thought of that sooner, I said evenly. You're right, Dorothy admitted, and that admission without argument, without excuse, surprised me more than anything else. We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop around us, the hiss of the espresso machine, soft laughter from a nearby table, the gentle chime as someone entered. The world kept turning even when my life felt like it was standing still. Finally I spoke. If, and this is a very big if, I decide to let you see them, there will be rules. Boundaries. Dorothy looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time I saw hope flicker there. You don't get to control me or my children. I continued, my voice steady and clear. You don't get to make demands. You show up when invited, not before. You respect my decisions. And the moment you violate those boundaries, it's over, forever. Do you understand? Dorothy nodded slowly. I understand. That's more than fair. I hadn't expected that. I'd expected pushback, resistance arguments that she was the grandmother and had rights. But there was nothing, just quiet acceptance. And one more thing, I said, leaning forward. I don't trust you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But if you're serious about this, about being part of their lives, you'll have to prove it. Not with money. Not with lawyers, with actions, with respect. Dorothy looked at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw something shift in her eyes, a softness I'd never seen before. I will, she said quietly. You have my word. We didn't say much more after that. Dorothy stood, picked up her small handbag, and paused as she passed by me. Thank you, she said evenly, for giving me a chance. I didn't respond, I just nodded. And then she was gone. I sat alone in the coffee shop for a long while after Dorothy left, staring at my cold tea. My stomach tightened as one of the babies kicked hard, as if they were processing the encounter too. I know, I whispered, rubbing my belly gently. Mama's not sure about this either. But as I stood and walked out into the cool Portland afternoon, I realized something had changed. Not in Dorothy. In me. For 7 years, I'd let the anger I felt toward the Ashfords eat away at me from the inside. I'd held onto it like a shield, thinking it protected me. But all it did was weigh me down, make me tired, hollow. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me. For releasing the anger that had pressed so heavy for so long. The door wasn't closed, but it wasn't wide open either. And that was enough. Labor started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Of course it did. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions for days, but this was different. This was real, sharp, relentless. This was my body saying it's time. I woke to a tightening across my belly so intense, it stole my breath. For a moment, I lay there in the dark, one hand pressed against my stomach, feeling the hardness beneath my palm. Then it released, and I could breathe again. 5 minutes later, another one came. Stronger this time, longer. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hand shaking slightly as I unlocked the screen. 3:14 in the morning. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of rain pattering against the window. I called Rebecca first. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Charlotte. What's wrong? It's time, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The contractions started. They're 5 minutes apart. I heard rustling on the other end, the sound of her sitting up fast. I'm on my way. 10 minutes. Don't move. I'm not going anywhere, I said, trying to laugh, but another contraction hit and turned it into a gasp. Next, I called my mother. Catherine answered immediately as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Sweetheart. Mom, I breathed. They're coming. The babies are coming. I'll meet you at the hospital, she said, her voice firm and calm in a way that steadied me. "You're going to be fine, Charlotte. You're strong. I'll be there." By the time Rebecca arrived, I was pacing the living room, one hand braced against my lower back, the other clutching my phone. My hospital bag sat by the door packed and ready for weeks. Rebecca took one look at me and grabbed it. "Let's go," she said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We're having babies today." The drive to Riverside Medical Center felt both endless and impossibly fast. Every pothole, every turn sent another wave of pain radiating through my body. Rebecca drove carefully, but quickly, her eyes flicking to me every few seconds. "You're doing great," she said. "Just breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it." I focused on her voice, on the rhythm of my breathing, on the rain streaking down the windshield. Anything to distract from the vice tightening around my abdomen every few minutes. When we pulled up to the hospital entrance, a nurse was already waiting with a wheelchair. Rebecca must have called ahead. I sank into it gratefully, my legs trembling. 38 weeks with twins, Rebecca told the nurse as she pushed me through the automatic doors. Contractions 5 minutes apart. The nurse nodded, already moving. "We've got her. Dr. Palmer's been notified." The labor and delivery room was bright and sterile, but someone had dimmed the overhead lights to a softer glow. I changed into a hospital gown with Rebecca's help, my hands clumsy and shaking. Another contraction hit as I climbed onto the bed, and I gripped the side rail so hard my knuckles went white. "Breathe." Rebecca reminded me, her hand on my shoulder. "You've got this." Dr. Palmer arrived a few minutes later, calm and professional as always. She checked my progress, her hands gentle but efficient. "You're at 4 centimeters, she said, pulling off her gloves. "We're on our way. It could be a few hours yet, so try to rest between contractions if you can." Rest, as if that were possible. My mother arrived just after 5 in the morning, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, her face pale but determined. She took one look at me and crossed the room, taking my hand in both of hers. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." And she wasn't. The hours blurred together after that. Morning light filtered through the blinds, turning the room a pale gold. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IVs, murmuring encouragement. Dr. Palmer returned every hour to check my progress. 6 centimeters, 7, 8. The contractions intensified, each one a wave that crested and broke and left me gasping in its wake. My mother held my left hand. Rebecca held my right. I squeezed them both so hard I was sure I'd leave bruises, but neither of them complained. "You're almost there," Dr. Palmer said during one check. 9 centimeters, not long now. I wanted to laugh. Not long. It felt like I'd been here forever, trapped in a cycle of pain and breathing and waiting. But then just after 2 in the afternoon, everything shifted. "I need to push." I gasped, the urge sudden and overwhelming. Dr. Palmer moved quickly, positioning herself at the foot of the bed. "All right, Charlotte. When the next contraction comes, I want you to push. Give me everything you've got." The next contraction hit like a freight train. I bore down, gritting my teeth, pouring every ounce of strength I had into that single moment. My mother's voice in my ear. "That's it, sweetheart. You're doing it." Rebecca's hand gripping mine. "You're so strong. Keep going." "Again," Dr. Palmer said. "Big push. I can see the head." I pushed again and again and again. And then at 2:47 in the afternoon, I heard it. A cry. High-pitched and indignant and absolutely perfect. "It's a boy," Dr. Palmer said, lifting a tiny wriggling form into view. "Your first son." Tears streamed down my face as they placed him on my chest, still wet and warm and impossibly small. His eyes were squeezed shut, his mouth open in a wail, his fists clenched tight. I curled my arms around him instinctively, feeling the rapid flutter of his heartbeat against mine. "Hi, baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Hi, Mama's here." But there wasn't time to linger. Another contraction was already building. "All right, Charlotte," Dr. Palmer said, her voice steady. "One more. Your second boy is ready." 4 minutes later, at 2:51, the second cry filled the room. Louder, if anything, just as perfect. 2 healthy boys. Dr. Palmer announced, a smile in her voice as she placed the second baby on my chest beside his brother. "Congratulations, Charlotte." I looked down at them, two tiny faces, two sets of impossibly small fingers, two beating hearts. They were here. They were real. They were mine. My mother was crying openly now, her hand over her mouth, her eyes shining. Rebecca snapped a photo, her own cheeks wet with tears. "They're beautiful," Catherine whispered. "Oh, sweetheart, they're perfect." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at them, these two miracles who'd somehow grown inside me, who'd survived everything, the divorce, the betrayal, the accident, the fear. They were here, safe, whole, Noah. I whispered, finally touching the first baby's tiny hand. His fingers curled around mine, reflexively gripping tight. And Ethan. I looked at the second baby, his eyes blinking open for just a moment before closing again. "Welcome. Mama's here." The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of exhaustion and wonder. The nurses weighed and measured the boys, Noah 6 pounds 3 ounces, Ethan 6 pounds 1 ounce, and bundled them in soft blankets before placing them in the clear bassinet beside my bed. My mother stayed for hours holding each baby in turn, whispering to them in a voice thick with emotion. Rebecca took a dozen photos, promising to send them to me later. By evening, I was alone with Noah and Ethan. They slept side by side in the bassinet, their chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. I watched them, unable to look away, unable to believe they were real. That's when my phone buzzed on the bedside table. I glanced at the screen. Stanley. I stared at his name for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it ring out, to pretend he didn't exist. But another part of me, the part that remembered 7 years, the part that knew he was still their father, picked up. "Hello," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then Charlotte. His voice was rough, uncertain. I'd never heard him sound like that before. "They're here." I said, my voice soft but firm. 2 boys, healthy, beautiful. Another pause, longer this time. I heard him exhale shakily on the other end. "Can I see them?" he asked finally. I looked at Noah and Ethan, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep. I thought about everything that had brought us here, the lies, the betrayal, the accident, the fear. I thought about Dorothy's apology, about my mother's forgiveness, about the boundaries I'd learned to set. "Not yet," I said quietly. "Maybe someday. But not now." "Charlotte." "Goodbye, Stanley." I hung up before he could say anything else. For a moment, I sat there in the dim hospital room, the phone still in my hand. Then I set it down, leaned over the bassinet, and gently touched each baby's head. "It's just us," I whispered, "and that's enough." 6 months into motherhood, I was still learning that I could function on 3 hours of sleep a night, learning that love could be so fierce it terrified me, learning that I was stronger than I thought, and learning slowly what forgiveness meant, not for them, but for myself. February in Portland was cold and wet, but the rain had stopped this morning, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of pine. I stood at the window of my apartment, Noah asleep in my arms, Ethan napping in the bassinet behind me. They were growing so fast it made my heart ache, 6 months old now, with chubby cheeks and curious eyes and tiny hands that reached for everything. My mother called them miracles. I called them mine. Life had settled into a rhythm over the past 6 months. Not easy exactly, not simple, but mine. My parents had moved closer to Portland, not into the city, but to a small house just outside it, close enough to visit several times a week. My mother's cancer was in remission. The chemo finished her hair growing back in soft silver curls. She held the boys every chance she got, singing them old lullabies I'd forgotten I knew. My father built them a wooden rocking horse that sat in the corner of my living room, waiting for the day they'd be big enough to climb onto it. Rebecca came by almost daily, bringing coffee and groceries and an endless supply of patience. She'd become Auntie Becca, the person who could make both boys laugh with silly faces and exaggerated voices. She was family now in every way that mattered. Dorothy had met the boys once, just once. It had been brief, supervised, awkward. She'd held Noah for exactly 4 minutes, her hands stiff and uncertain, before handing him back. She'd looked at Ethan but hadn't asked to hold him. Before she left, she'd turned to me and said quietly, "Thank you." I'd nodded. That was all. Stanley had been more persistent. He'd asked to see them a week after they were born. I'd said no. He'd asked again a month later. I'd said not yet. Finally, in December, I'd agreed to supervise visits 1 hour once a month with Andrea present. Today was his third visit. I opened the door at exactly 2 o'clock. Stanley stood on the landing, his hands shoved into his coat pockets, his face uncertain. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Charlotte," he said quietly. "Stanley," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. Andrea was already inside, sitting on the couch with her briefcase open, a legal pad in her lap. She nodded at Stanley, but said nothing. This was the arrangement Andrea present no exceptions. I wasn't taking chances. Stanley stepped into the living room and stopped when he saw the boys. They were on a play mat on the floor, Ethan on his back, batting at a hanging toy, Noah on his stomach, trying to push himself up on his arms. "They're so big," Stanley said, his voice rough. "They grow fast," I said evenly, crossing my arms. He crouched down beside the mat, not touching them, just watching. Ethan turned his head at the movement, his wide blue eyes locking onto Stanley's face. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "They look like you," Stanley said softly, glancing up at me. I didn't respond to that. Instead, I sat down in the armchair across from the playmat, my hands folded in my lap. Andrea remained on the couch, watchful but silent. Stanley reached out slowly, letting Noah grab his finger. The baby's grip was surprisingly strong. Stanley smiled a small, sad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can I hold one of them?" he asked, looking at me. I hesitated. Every instinct I had screamed to say no, to protect them, to keep them away from the man who'd hurt me. But I'd made a promise to myself months ago I wouldn't let my anger poison my son's chances at knowing their father. Not if he proved he deserved it. "You can hold Noah," I said quietly. "But if he cries, you give him back immediately." "Of course," Stanley said, nodding quickly. He lifted Noah carefully, cradling him against his chest with an awkwardness that made it clear he'd never held a baby before. Noah squirmed for a moment, then settled his tiny fist curling into Stanley's shirt. Stanley's eyes glistened. "He's perfect," he whispered. "They both are," I said firmly. "And they're mine, Stanley, not yours, not your family's. Mine." Stanley looked up at me, his expression pained. "I know. I'm not asking for custody. I'm not asking for anything except a chance to be a father, if you'll let me." I studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of the man who'd betrayed me, who'd chosen Brittany, who'd let his mother call me a mistake. I saw traces of him there, but I also saw something else, something that looked like regret. "Forgiveness isn't something you can demand, Stanley," I said quietly, my voice steady and clear. "It's something you have to earn. If you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to prove it with actions, not words, that you've changed. That might take months. It might take years. I'm not promising anything except this: I won't stop you. But I won't make it easy either." Stanley nodded slowly, his throat working as he swallowed. "That's fair. More than fair. And one more thing," I continued, leaning forward. "The moment you hurt them emotionally in any way, you're cut off. Forever. Do you understand?" "I understand," Stanley said, his voice hoarse. He looked down at Noah, then back at me. "I won't let them down, I swear." I didn't respond to that. Promises were easy, actions were what mattered. After an hour, Stanley left. He handed Noah back to me, gently touched Ethan's cheek with one finger, and walked out without another word. Andrea stayed for a few minutes longer, making notes, asking if I was all right. I told her I was. And I was. That afternoon, I took the boys to the park near my apartment. The sun had come out pale and watery, but warm enough. I spread a blanket on the grass and laid them down side by side, their eyes wide as they stared up at the sky. I sat beside them cross-legged and watched them discover the world. Noah grabbed at a blade of grass. Ethan kicked his legs, making happy gurgling sounds. I picked up Noah's tiny hand and kissed it gently. They'd offered me $8 million to disappear, to erase myself from their lives as if 7 years of marriage could be bought and sold like a transaction. I'd taken the money, but I hadn't disappeared. I'd built a new life instead, one where I wasn't defined by their expectations or their judgment or their need for control. Forgiveness was complicated. It wasn't black and white, all or nothing. It was messy and slow and sometimes painful. I'd forgiven my parents for pushing me away. I was learning to forgive Dorothy for the cruelty. I didn't know if I'd ever forgive Stanley completely. Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But I'd learned this. Holding on to anger only hurt me. Letting it go even a little was freedom. The door wasn't closed, but it wasn't wide open either, and that was okay. Because for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't living for anyone else's expectations. Not the Ashfords, not Stanley's, not even my parents. I was just me, Charlotte, a mother, a daughter, a friend. And that was enough. I looked down at Noah and Ethan, their faces turned toward mine, their eyes bright and trusting. They didn't know about the betrayal or the money or the accident. They didn't know about Dorothy's cruelty or Brittany's lies. They just knew that I was here, that I loved them, that I would protect them with everything I had. This is our life now, I whispered to them. Not perfect, not without scars, but ours. Completely and undeniably ours. And that's the greatest gift of all. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the park in golden light. Noah smiled his first real smile, wide and toothless, and absolutely perfect. Ethan kicked his legs harder, his own smile following. I smiled back, tears pricking my eyes. This was home. Not a place, not a house. But these two boys, this moment, this hard-won peace. This was enough. Looking back on everything that happened, the family betrayal, the family revenge, the pain, the losses, and the unexpected miracles, I realize now that my story isn't just about survival. It's about learning who I am when everything I thought defined me was stripped away. Don't be like me. Don't wait 7 years to see the truth. Don't sacrifice your voice, your boundaries, your self-worth for someone else's approval. I gave up my parents, my identity, my dreams, all to fit into a family that never truly wanted me. And when they tried family revenge by offering me money to disappear, I almost let them erase me completely. But God had other plans. When I thought I'd lost everything, He gave me Noah and Ethan. When I thought I was alone, He brought my parents back. When family betrayal nearly destroyed me, He reminded me that I was never truly abandoned. God doesn't waste our pain. He transforms it. And sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the hardest trials. Here's what I've learned. Family betrayal doesn't define you. Family revenge doesn't heal you. Forgiveness. Real forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of bitterness. It's choosing peace over payback. It's trusting that God sees, God knows, and God will make things right in His time. My advice: trust your instincts. Set boundaries. Don't trade your dignity for approval. And remember, the people who truly love you will never ask you to become smaller to make them comfortable. God gave me a second chance, not just at motherhood, but at life itself. And I'm grateful not for the pain, but for what it taught me. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced family betrayal or struggled with forgiveness? I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more meaningful stories like this one. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. I appreciate every single one of you. Please note, the stories shared on this channel may contain fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If this content doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences.